Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Horror Stories. I know many of you use these episodes to fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the episodes. Story 1. The day had started off like any other, with the usual morning routine of coffee and a brisk walk through the neighborhood. I was eager to return to the comfort of my home, which had become a sanctuary from the chaos of work and daily life. As I approached my front door, I noticed something unusual, a faint, uncomfortable draft. My heart skipped a beat when I saw that the door was ajar. I immediately quickened my pace, my mind racing with thoughts of what could be inside. The lock, usually so reliable, was broken. The once secure barrier had been forced open, leaving the door slightly swinging on its hinges. I froze for a moment, my breath catching in my throat. The sense of violation was immediate and overwhelming. I took out my phone and dialed 911, my hands trembling as I tried to stay calm. The dispatcher assured me that help was on the way and advised me to stay outside until the police arrived. As I waited on the porch, my mind swirled with anxiety. Who could have done this? Why would someone break into my home? The questions were endless, but the answers eluded me. The wait seemed eternal, though it was only a few minutes before the flashing lights of the police car illuminated the street. The officers conducted a thorough search of the premises, carefully inspecting each room and corner. They took note of the broken lock and the forced entry, collecting fingerprints and other potential evidence. Despite their meticulous efforts, they found no one inside. There were no signs of forced entry beyond the broken lock, no apparent damage to the interior, and no one hiding in the house. As the police conducted their investigation, I began to walk through the house, trying to gauge the extent of the intrusion. It was then that I noticed the unsettling changes. Small personal items had been moved or tampered with. My heart sank as I saw that the photographs that once adorned the walls were now askew, some even missing from their frames. In the bedroom, my jewelry box had been rifled through. The delicate pieces of jewelry that had been neatly arranged were now scattered, some missing entirely. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I realized that someone had been going through my most personal possessions. Exploring the intimate details of my life, I checked the kitchen next, where I noticed that the contents of the drawers and cabinets were in disarray. The usually orderly kitchen was now a mess, with utensils and dishes misplaced. Even my pantry had been disturbed, with food items out of place and some seemingly inspected. The living room was no better. My bookshelves were in disarray, with books pulled out and stacked haphazardly. The television remote and other small electronics had been moved from their usual spots. It was as if someone had systematically gone through every room, making a point to touch and examine everything. The police officers reconvened with me, discussing their findings and reassuring me that they would continue their investigation. They advised me to make a list of any missing items and to review the security footage if I had a camera system. I nodded, but the reassurance felt hollow against the backdrop of the violation I had just experienced. As the officers left, I was alone with a lingering sense of dread in the aftermath of the intrusion. I meticulously cataloged the missing items and took stock of the disarray. Each moved object felt like a personal affront, a reminder that someone had breached my private space and tampered with my life. The emotional impact was profound. The comfort of home had turned into a place of anxiety and fear. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, of an unseen presence that had invaded my sanctuary. The intrusion into my personal space was not just physical but psychological, leaving a lingering sense of vulnerability. In the days that followed, I tried to restore some sense of normalcy. I repaired the broken lock and had a new security system installed, hoping to regain a semblance of control and safety. I was more cautious than ever, locking doors and windows with obsessive care and avoiding any patterns that might make me a target. Despite these efforts, the sense of violation remained. I found myself constantly checking and rechecking locks, scrutinizing every noise or disturbance with heightened anxiety. The intrusion had shattered my sense of security, and the physical repairs could not mend the emotional damage. The police continued their investigation, but without more concrete evidence or leads, progress was slow. I was left to grapple with the aftermath, trying to rebuild my sense of safety and reclaim the comfort of my home. Each day was a struggle to find peace amidst the lingering shadows of the intrusion, a reminder that my personal sanctuary had been breached by an unknown and unsettling presence. The experience had changed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. The intrusion into my personal space had left a mark on my psyche, a constant reminder of the fragility of safety and the impact of having one's most intimate spaces violated. It was a stark lesson in the vulnerability we face in our most private moments, a reminder that security is never as absolute as we might believe. Story 2. The park across from my apartment had always been a place of solace. I would often walk there in the evenings, enjoying the calm and the view of the city lights reflecting off the pond. It was my escape from the hustle and bustle of everyday life, a place where I could clear my mind and unwind. But everything changed one evening when I noticed a man sitting on a park bench directly across from my apartment. At first, I didn't think much of it. He was an older man, dressed in a simple gray coat with a fedora tilted at an angle. He seemed like any other park-goer, lost in his own world. Over time, I began to realize that he was always there, sitting on that same bench at the same time every evening. It became a part of my routine to see him as I left my apartment and walked to the park. What made the situation unsettling was not just his constant presence, but the way he seemed to watch me. It was as if his gaze was fixed on me, tracking my movements with a precision that felt invasive. I couldn't shake the feeling that he was observing me closely. Even though we never interacted, his eyes hidden beneath the brim of his fedora seemed to follow me wherever I went within the park. One chilly autumn evening, I decided to confront him. I was tired of the creeping sense of paranoia and decided it was time to address it directly. I approached the bench where he sat, his gaze still fixed ahead, seemingly oblivious to my approach. As I stood before him, he slowly turned his head to meet my eyes. "Excuse me," I began, trying to keep my voice steady. "I've noticed you sitting here every day. It feels like you're watching me. Is there a reason for that?" He looked at me with an expression that was both calm and enigmatic. A faint smile played at the corners of his lips. "I'm just watching over you," he said in a voice that was soft and measured. "Sometimes people need a guardian, even if they don't know it." His response sent a chill down my spine. The idea of someone claiming to watch over me, particularly when it felt so intrusive, was deeply unsettling. I wanted to ask more, to demand answers, but the intensity of his gaze made me hesitate. His demeanor was unnervingly serene, as though he was entirely comfortable with the discomfort he caused. I decided not to press further. I mumbled something about needing to go and walked away, feeling a wave of relief mixed with anxiety. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of his eyes on me. Even though he was no longer there, I felt an overwhelming urge to escape the situation, to find a place where I could feel safe and unobserved. The following day, I began to make arrangements to move to a new apartment. I didn't share my reasons with anyone, fearing that my friends and family would think I was overreacting. I simply told them that I wanted a change of scenery. The process of packing and organizing was a distraction, but the thought of leaving the unsettling presence behind gave me a sense of urgency. The move was exhausting but exhilarating. I found a new place in a different part of the city, far from the park and the man who had intruded on my sense of security. I hoped that a fresh start would help me shed the lingering feeling of being watched. The first few nights in the new apartment were peaceful. I settled in, enjoyed the new surroundings, and began to relax. But despite the change in environment, the sense of unease never fully dissipated. I still felt like someone was watching me, even though there was no one around. The anxiety that had plagued me in the old apartment seemed to follow me like a shadow that refused to leave. I tried to rationalize it. Perhaps it was the result of the paranoia that had built up over the months. I had been so on edge, so attuned to the idea of being observed, that the feeling had become a persistent companion. I started to question whether the man had been real or just a figment of my imagination, a manifestation of my fears. As the weeks went by, the sensation of being watched began to wane, but it never entirely disappeared. I found myself double-checking locks and curtains, constantly aware of every sound and movement in my new apartment. The experience had left me more cautious and less trusting of the world around me. I avoided returning to the old park, and I rarely ventured out in the evenings, opting instead to stay indoors where I felt safe. The man on the bench became a ghost of my past, a reminder of the unsettling experience that had driven me to seek a new beginning. Despite the new apartment and the change of scenery, I couldn't shake the feeling that the man's presence had left a mark on me. The idea of someone watching me, even with the guise of being a guardian, had altered my perception of safety and trust. I realized that the feeling of being watched was no longer tied to a specific location or person, but had become a part of my psyche. In the end, I had moved away from the park and the mysterious man, but the emotional residue of that experience stayed with me. It had taught me to be more aware of my surroundings and to question the nature of security and privacy. The man's unsettling smile and cryptic words remained a haunting reminder of how deeply unsettling it can be to feel observed, even by someone who claims to be watching over you. Story 3. The first time I heard it, I dismissed it as a trick of the mind. I had recently moved into a charming but old house on the outskirts of town. The place had character, with creaky wooden floors and high ceilings that made it feel spacious and somewhat grand. I was living alone, a decision I had made to enjoy some solitude and peace after a particularly stressful period at work. That first night, as I settled into my new home, I was surprised by how quiet it was. The usual hum of the city seemed miles away, and the only sounds were the occasional creak of the house settling. But just as I was about to drift off to sleep, I heard a faint rhythmic sound coming from somewhere in the house. It was so subtle at first that I thought it might be the old pipes or a draft playing tricks on me. Over the next few nights, however, the sound grew more distinct. It started as soft, muffled footsteps that seemed to echo through the empty rooms. The footsteps would appear sporadically, and each time I would get up and check the house, finding nothing out of the ordinary. The windows and doors were securely locked, and the house was as empty as I had left it. As the days turned into weeks, the footsteps became more persistent. It was no longer just a faint sound. It felt like someone was walking through every room of the house, pacing back and forth. The sound seemed to follow a pattern, sometimes starting in the hallway, moving to the kitchen, and then to the bedrooms. I began to dread the nights, knowing that I would be kept awake by the constant eerie sound. One particularly unsettling evening, as I was watching television in the living room, the footsteps began. They started softly but soon became louder and more pronounced. I could hear them coming closer and closer, making their way through the house. I paused the TV and listened intently, anxiety tightening in my chest. The footsteps continued, moving through the house with a deliberate, almost purposeful rhythm. Determined to find the source of the noise, I grabbed a flashlight and made my way through the house. I checked every room, every closet, and every nook and cranny, but found nothing out of place. The house was as empty as ever. I checked the windows and doors again, convinced that there must be some rational explanation, but everything was secure and there were no signs of intrusion. The sound continued to haunt me. It became a nightly ritual to check the house before going to bed, and I even installed a few additional locks on the doors, thinking they might provide some sense of security. Despite my efforts, the footsteps persisted, always just out of sight but never quite disappearing. My friends and family were sympathetic but skeptical when I told them about the noises. They suggested that it might be the house settling, or perhaps my imagination playing tricks on me. I wanted to believe that it was just a figment of my imagination, but the sounds were too consistent, too real to be dismissed so easily. One night I decided to stay up and document the sounds. I set up a voice recorder in the hallway where the footsteps seemed to be most prominent and waited. As the hours passed, I could hear the footsteps on the recording, clear and distinct. The recording also captured a faint whispering, though it was too indistinct to make out any specific words. Listening to the playback only heightened my sense of dread, confirming that the sounds were not just in my head. Desperate for answers, I contacted a local paranormal investigation group. They came to the house with their equipment, setting up cameras and recording devices throughout the property. They spent a night in the house, documenting the sounds and conducting their investigation. Their findings were inconclusive. The equipment picked up only the usual creaks and groans of an old house. The investigators left without any definitive answers, but their visit only deepened my unease. The footsteps continued, and the house became a place of constant anxiety. I started leaving lights on throughout the house, hoping that the presence of light might dispel whatever was causing the noises. I even considered moving, but the thought of packing up and leaving felt overwhelming. One particularly tense night, I was awoken by the sound of footsteps right outside my bedroom door. My heart raced as I lay frozen under the covers, listening to the rhythmic pacing. I finally mustered the courage to open the door and peek into the hallway. The house was empty, but the sound of footsteps seemed to be right there, echoing through the hallway. I decided to confront the sound head-on. I stood in the hallway and called out, "Is someone there?" My voice echoed in the empty space, but there was no response. The footsteps stopped, and for a moment the house was silent. The silence was almost more unnerving than the footsteps. Despite my attempts to rationalize the situation, the anxiety continued to grip me. The feeling of being watched, of having an unseen presence in the house, was inescapable. I grew more cautious, avoiding the darker areas of the house and spending as little time alone as possible. One evening, while browsing through old records in the attic, I came across an old journal hidden among the boxes. It belonged to the previous owner of the house. As I read through it, I discovered that they had experienced similar disturbances. The journal described hearing footsteps and feeling a constant sense of unease, though it never mentioned any specific cause. The last entry ended abruptly with a cryptic note about the echoes of the past. The discovery of the journal offered some solace, knowing that I wasn't alone in my experiences. It didn't provide answers, but it connected me to the previous occupant in a way that made me feel less isolated. The footsteps gradually faded, though the house never felt entirely quiet again. Living in the house had taught me to appreciate the boundaries between reality and fear. The echoes of those footsteps served as a reminder of the mysteries that can linger in old creaky spaces. The experience left an indelible mark, a constant reminder of the thin line between the known and the unknown. Story 4. The first sign that something was wrong came when I noticed the silence. My cat Whiskers was usually the first to greet me when I came home. Her purring and playful antics were a comforting part of my daily routine. But on that particular day, as I walked through the door, the house felt eerily quiet. I called out for her, but there was no response. I searched the house thoroughly, checking all her favorite spots, but Whiskers was nowhere to be found. My initial worry quickly turned into panic. I scoured every corner of the house, checked under furniture, and even peered into the closets, hoping she was hiding. I then ventured outside, calling her name and shaking her treat bag, but there was no sign of her. After hours of searching with no results, I began to post flyers around the neighborhood. The flyer depicted a photo of Whiskers with a brief description and my contact information. I handed out copies to local businesses and spoke with my neighbors, pleading for any information about her whereabouts. Days turned into a week, and my anxiety grew with each passing day. I received occasional tips from neighbors and kind strangers, but none led to any concrete information. The absence of Whiskers weighed heavily on me. I could not understand why she had disappeared or where she might have gone. I continued to hope for her safe return, clinging to the thought that someone might find her and bring her back home. Then one evening, just as I was starting to lose hope, I heard a faint, familiar meow from outside. My heart leaped as I rushed to the door. There, sitting on the front step, was Whiskers, but the sight of her filled me with a mix of relief and horror. She was clearly injured. Her fur was matted and dirty, and she walked with a noticeable limp. Her eyes, usually bright and inquisitive, were now dull and frightened. I immediately scooped her up and took her inside, carefully examining her injuries. I cleaned her wounds and gave her some food and water, but her condition was worrisome. She was skittish and avoided eye contact, further confirming my fear that she had experienced something traumatic. Despite my care and affection, she remained withdrawn and seemed to flinch at sudden movements. As I gently examined her collar, I noticed a small folded note attached to it. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. The note was written in a neat but unfamiliar handwriting and read, "She was ours for a while." The message sent a shiver down my spine. It was cryptic and unsettling, suggesting that someone had intentionally kept her from me. The implications of the note were terrifying. It meant that Whiskers had been in someone else's possession, and the condition in which she returned hinted at possible mistreatment. My mind raced with questions. Who could have taken her? Why did they keep her? And what had they done to her during that week? I contacted the local authorities and showed them the note and Whiskers' injuries. They took down the details, but seemed unsure of how to proceed with the case given the lack of evidence and the cryptic nature of the note. They advised me to take Whiskers to a vet for a thorough examination and to monitor her behavior for any signs of ongoing distress. The vet's examination revealed that Whiskers had multiple bruises and a few minor cuts. The vet couldn't determine the exact cause of her injuries, but assured me that she would recover with time and proper care. The trauma she had endured was evident in her behavior, and the vet recommended a calm and supportive environment to help her adjust. As days went by, I noticed small improvements in Whiskers' demeanor. She began to explore her surroundings more and gradually returned to her playful self, though she remained cautious and easily startled. Despite the progress, the mystery of her disappearance and the ominous note haunted me. I felt a profound sense of violation, knowing that someone had taken her and held her against her will. I continued to investigate on my own, reaching out to local animal shelters and rescue groups to see if they had any information about missing pets or unusual reports. I even started to ask around in nearby neighborhoods, hoping to gather any leads. But as time passed, the case seemed to grow colder, and no new information surfaced. The note became a constant reminder of the unknown threat that had intruded into our lives. I tried to move on and focus on Whiskers' recovery, but the sense of unease never completely left me. I installed additional security measures around my home and made sure that all windows and doors were securely locked. The experience had left me with a heightened sense of vigilance and a lingering fear that something could happen again. Despite the trauma, Whiskers slowly began to reclaim her place in my life. Her playful antics and affectionate purrs gradually returned, bringing a sense of normalcy back to our home. I showered her with love and attention, determined to help her heal from the physical and emotional wounds she had endured. Though the mystery of her disappearance remained unsolved, the experience had taught me the value of vigilance and the importance of cherishing the ones we love. The note that once held such power over my thoughts became a symbol of resilience and a reminder of the strength found in the bonds we share with our pets. Whiskers' return was a bittersweet reminder of the unknown dangers that lurk in the world, but it also reaffirmed the strength of our connection and the importance of never giving up hope. As she nestled into her favorite spot on the couch, I felt a profound sense of gratitude and a renewed commitment to keeping her safe. The mystery of her disappearance may never be fully resolved, but the love and care I provided her would always be a constant, unwavering presence in her life. Story 5. It was an ordinary Saturday morning when I accidentally knocked over my bathroom mirror. It shattered into 1,000 tiny pieces, scattering across the tile floor with a cacophony of tinkling glass. I stood in stunned silence, the sharp fragments glittering like cruel confetti. The mirror had been a fixture in the small, dimly lit bathroom for years, and its sudden destruction left me feeling unsettled. Cleaning up the mess was a tedious task. I carefully gathered the shards, mindful of the potential for injury, and disposed of them. Once the room was free of glass, I turned my attention to replacing the mirror. It was an inconvenience, but it seemed like a simple fix. I ordered a new mirror online, choosing a sleek, modern design that would fit the space perfectly. Days passed and the new mirror arrived. I was relieved to see the delivery man carrying it up to my door. He handed me the package with a terse smile and disappeared quickly, as if eager to be done with the delivery. I tore open the box, revealing the pristine mirror encased in protective padding. Along with the mirror was a note from the delivery service. "Hope this one doesn't crack." The note, with its casual yet ominous tone, sent a shiver down my spine. I dismissed it as a strange joke or a coincidence, the kind of dark humor you sometimes encounter in unexpected places. I hung the new mirror on the wall, admiring its clean, reflective surface. The bathroom felt brighter and more open with the new addition. For the first few days, everything seemed normal, but as time went on, I began to experience an unsettling feeling whenever I looked into the mirror. It was as if the reflective surface was hiding something just beyond my sight. Each time I caught my own reflection, a chill would run down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching me from the other side. I tried to rationalize the sensation. Perhaps it was merely a psychological effect, the result of having been so recently shaken by the old mirror's breakage. But the discomfort persisted. I found myself avoiding the bathroom, and when I did enter, I would quickly avert my gaze from the mirror. The feeling of being watched grew stronger each day. The cracks from the old mirror had not been completely cleaned up. Despite my efforts to sweep away the broken glass, I knew some shards had probably been missed. I wondered if these remnants were causing the uneasy feeling or if there was something more to the note that had come with the new mirror. One evening, after a particularly unsettling day, I decided to investigate further. I carefully examined the area around the old mirror's former location. The tile floor was clean, but I noticed a small dark spot near the corner of the room. I hadn't seen it before, and it seemed to be a remnant of the shattered glass. I picked up a flashlight and scrutinized the spot, but it appeared to be just a smudge. Determined to find a logical explanation, I decided to clean the area thoroughly. I used a vacuum cleaner with a nozzle attachment, making sure to get into every crevice. I also checked the wall behind where the old mirror had been, but it was solid and undisturbed. As I worked, my mind kept returning to the note that had come with the new mirror. It seemed so innocuous, yet oddly foreboding. I couldn't help but feel that there was something more behind it. Was it a veiled threat or simply a prank? I couldn't shake the feeling that it was connected to the strange sensations I had been experiencing. That night, as I lay in bed, I was haunted by vivid dreams. I dreamed of shadows moving behind the mirror, of eyes peering out from the glass. I awoke in a cold sweat, the discomfort from the dream spilling over into my waking life. I decided to seek help, reaching out to friends and family, but they all dismissed my fears as the overactive imagination of someone who had recently experienced a minor trauma. Feeling desperate, I contacted a local paranormal investigator. I explained the situation, including the note, the strange feeling, and the persistent unease. The investigator agreed to visit and take a look, intrigued by the unusual circumstances. When the investigator arrived, they conducted a thorough examination of the bathroom and the new mirror. They used various tools and techniques to check for any anomalies, including electromagnetic readings and thermal scans. To my relief, they found no evidence of anything supernatural or unusual. The mirror was simply a mirror, devoid of any hidden threats or malevolent forces. Despite the investigators' findings, the sense of unease did not fully dissipate. I continued to feel as though I was being watched whenever I looked into the mirror. The investigators suggested that the psychological impact of the incident, combined with the unsettling note, might be contributing to my ongoing discomfort. I took their advice to heart and tried to focus on moving past the experience. I made a conscious effort to use the bathroom more regularly and to avoid letting the mirror's presence affect me. I also tried to engage in activities that would help distract me from the lingering feelings of unease. Over time, the intensity of the fear gradually lessened, though it never completely disappeared. The new mirror remained a source of discomfort, but I learned to manage my anxiety and face the mirror with more confidence. I kept the note and the remnants of the old mirror in the box, a reminder of the strange and unsettling experience. The incident taught me about the power of suggestion and the ways in which our fears can shape our perceptions. While the mirror itself was not sinister, the combination of a broken past and an ominous message had created an environment ripe for anxiety. I learned to confront my fears and to recognize that sometimes the most unsettling things are those that exist solely in our minds.